What if I told you the most dangerous person in a narcissist's life isn't another manipulator, but someone with empathy so deep it becomes their ultimate weapon? Imagine the quiet strength of a person who sees through lies, who listens so intently it terrifies the one who thrives on chaos. This is not about revenge. It's about revelation. A super empath doesn't scream, they observe. They don't react, they mirror. And in that mirror, the narcissist sees a reflection so raw, so painfully honest, it becomes unbearable. Ever seen a predator confused by its prey? That's Act 1. But here's where it twists, because the empath doesn't just survive, they lead. And by Act 3, the narcissist isn't just exposed, they're transformed or destroyed. You might laugh, wondering, how does kindness break a master manipulator? Stay with me, because what happens when light shines into the darkest corner is not just poetic, it's explosive. Imagine standing in front of a mirror that doesn't just reflect your appearance, but your intentions, your emotions, your true self, raw and unfiltered. That's what it feels like for a narcissist when they encounter a super empath. The emotional mirror isn't loud. It doesn't accuse or shout or try to win arguments. It simply reflects. And that reflection becomes unbearable because narcissists thrive in distortion. They manipulate, twist, project, and gaslight until reality bends to their advantage. But when a super empath enters the scene, that game collapses, not through confrontation, but through quiet awareness. The empath doesn't take the bait. They don't react the way the narcissist expects. They observe. They feel, they remain calm, and in doing so, they mirror the emotional chaos being projected onto them without absorbing it. This unnerves the narcissist more than any fight ever could. You see, narcissists rely on emotional chaos to stay in control. They create conflict to dominate. They thrive when others are confused, insecure, desperate for approval. But when a super empath looks them in the eye and sees straight through the mask, it's like flipping on a spotlight in a dark room. Suddenly, all the manipulation, all the control, all the charm falls flat. The narcissist is forced to see themselves as they really are, not as the superior figure they pretend to be. And that's terrifying, not because the empath attacks, but because they don't. They remain grounded, and in doing so, they disrupt the entire power dynamic. What's most powerful about this mirror effect is its subtlety. It doesn't seek vengeance. It doesn't crave validation. It simply exists, and that's exactly why it works. The narcissist may lash out, escalate, or try to provoke a reaction, but the empath doesn't engage in the performance. Instead of returning the narcissist's fire with more fire, the empath responds with clarity, self-awareness, and calm boundaries. They might ask disarming questions like, "Is this really how you want to show up right now?" Or say nothing at all, letting the silence speak louder than any accusation. And that silence, the kind that comes not from weakness but from strength, becomes deafening. At first, the narcissist believes they can win. They see the empath's compassion as a vulnerability to exploit. They test, they push, they play their usual games, but over time they realize something isn't working. Their charm isn't charming. Their control tactics fall flat. Their lies are seen for what they are, and they begin to unravel, not because the empath has exposed them to the world, but because they've been exposed to themselves. It's not revenge, it's reality, and reality, to a narcissist, is the ultimate torture. The emotional mirror also forces the narcissist to feel something they've spent their entire life avoiding: accountability. When an empath holds space with unwavering presence, it creates a pressure that forces the narcissist inward. They begin to feel the discomfort they've been projecting onto others. And unlike the empath, they have no tools to process it. They panic. They blame. They retreat. Or they lash out in desperation. But either way, the control they once had starts slipping through their fingers like sand, and the more the empath refuses to play the game, the more powerless the narcissist becomes. Here's the part that most people miss. This mirror doesn't work because the empath is perfect or invulnerable. It works because the empath has done their inner work. They've faced their own shadows. They've learned how to regulate their emotions, how to stand firm in their truth without needing external validation. They've grown strong not by dominating others, but by mastering themselves. And in doing so, they become immune to manipulation. That immunity drives the narcissist mad because it removes their ability to control the emotional environment. Even when the narcissist tries to gaslight, "You're too sensitive, you're imagining things, you're overreacting," the empath doesn't crumble. They know what they feel, They know what they saw, and they don't need to prove it. That quiet confidence acts like a mirror the narcissist can't escape. It shows them their tactics aren't working, their illusions are failing, and they're not in control anymore. There's also a strange irony in all of this. The narcissist who believes they are the master of perception ends up exposed by the one person who doesn't even try to expose them. They project their worst traits onto others, hoping never to be discovered. But the empath's mirror doesn't just reflect the narcissist's actions. It reflects their emptiness, their desperation, their fear of being insignificant. And once that mirror is up, it's impossible to unsee what's been revealed. The narcissist may run, deny, or distract, but the truth has already been planted, and it festers. Sometimes the empath doesn't even have to say anything. Their presence alone is enough. A look, a pause, a refusal to be baited. These become powerful weapons of reflection, not because they're meant to hurt, but because they're rooted in awareness. And awareness to someone who thrives in denial is like acid to the skin. It stings, it burns, it strips away layers of false identity, and the narcissist, who can't bear to be truly seen, starts to unravel. Boundary mastery is not about walls, it's about clarity. A super empath doesn't build fortresses to shut people out. They define sacred lines that protect their peace, values, and emotional space. And when a narcissist comes into their world trying to distort, control, or exploit, these boundaries become like an invisible force field. They stop manipulation not by aggression but by consistency. The empath doesn't scream no, they say it calmly, firmly, and repeatedly if necessary without flinching. And that calmness, that's what shakes the narcissist, because they're used to control through emotional chaos, yelling, guilt tripping, threats, drama. But when someone refuses to flinch, refuses to be pulled into the game stops working. At first, the narcissist sees boundaries as a challenge to overcome. They'll test them. They'll try to get around them. They'll act confused, hurt, or outraged. They might laugh them off or subtly shame the empath for having needs. You're too rigid. Why are you making such a big deal? I thought you were different. But the empath, who has often spent years being drained by emotional vampires, now stands firm. They've learned the cost of people-pleasing. They've realized that every time they say yes to someone else at the expense of themselves, they lose a piece of their soul. So now their no is sacred. Their distance is intentional. Their time, energy, and space are non-negotiable. What the narcissist fails to understand is that boundaries are not barriers to love. They're prerequisites for it. The super empath doesn't set boundaries because they hate people. They do it because they finally love themselves. That shift, that internal revolution, changes everything. Because when the empath stops seeking approval, they become untouchable. They no longer need to be understood by the narcissist, liked by the narcissist, or validated by the narcissist. And that removal of need is what dismantles the narcissist's power. They thrive when others depend on them emotionally. But when someone stands in front of them and says, "I will not tolerate this," and means it, the narcissist is cornered. Boundary mastery also comes with consequences, and the super empath isn't afraid to enforce them. It's not about making threats, it's about quiet action. If a narcissist crosses the line, the empath doesn't escalate. They disengage, they walk away, they leave the room, they end the call, they block the number, and they do it without explaining, justifying, or seeking permission. That silence, that self-respect, creates a void the narcissist can't tolerate, because they feed on emotional reactions, tears, anger, desperation. But when all they're met with is a closed door and unwavering stillness, their control evaporates. The beauty of boundary mastery lies in repetition. The empath doesn't just draw a line once, they maintain it. Every time the narcissist tries to return, apologize without meaning it, or guilt their way back in, the empath doesn't budge. "I've already said no. That behavior isn't acceptable. I'm not available for this conversation." Simple, clear, emotionless. And those words, spoken without heat, burn hotter than any argument ever could. They signal that the empath is no longer programmable, no longer susceptible to charm or fear. They're operating from inner alignment, not emotional dependency. Of course, setting boundaries isn't always clean or easy. The narcissist may escalate. They might try to turn others against the empath, spread lies, or play the victim. But even in the face of social sabotage, the empath stays rooted. They understand that protecting their peace is more important than maintaining appearances. They choose internal freedom over external approval, and while the narcissist is busy performing for the crowd, the empath is quietly building a life that can't be infiltrated. One of the most powerful elements of boundary mastery is how it rewrites the empath's identity. No longer the one who absorbs everyone's pain, they now filter it. They choose what enters their mind, their heart, and their schedule. They say yes with intention and no without guilt. They no longer confuse compassion with compliance, and that shift creates ripple effects. People notice. Other manipulators start to steer clear. Healthy individuals start to lean in, because clarity repels chaos and boundaries attract respect. Even the narcissist, deep down, starts to sense the futility. Their usual tactics, love bombing, gaslighting, triangulation, hit a wall. The empath doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't play, they just remain steady. And in that steadiness, the narcissist begins to unravel. Because what they can't control, they fear, and what they fear, they eventually retreat from. The empath's strength lies not in overpowering, but in refusing to be overpowered. It's not a fight. It's a refusal to fight on their terms, and that refusal speaks louder than any confrontation ever could. Boundary mastery is not loud, it's not dramatic, it doesn't seek revenge, it seeks peace. And in seeking peace, it becomes a kind of storm the narcissist can't weather, because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who cannot be manipulated. Radical detachment is not indifference, and it's not cruelty. It's a conscious, deliberate choice to remove emotional investment from a relationship that feeds on suffering. When a super empath practices radical detachment with a narcissist, it's not because they've stopped caring altogether, but because they've stopped sacrificing themselves in the name of connection. This kind of detachment isn't cold, it's fiercely protective. It's a declaration that says, I will no longer bleed for someone who only ever brings knives. And it cuts deep, not into the empath, but into the narcissist's entire illusion of control. Because when the empath withdraws their emotional energy, the narcissist loses their oxygen. To a narcissist, the most terrifying experience isn't confrontation. It's being ignored. It's being emotionally invisible. They rely on the empath's reactions, empathy, attention, and willingness to fix things. Every guilt trip, every drama, every manipulation tactic is built on the assumption that the empath will respond. But radical detachment rewrites that script. The empath no longer reacts. They no longer explain. They no longer argue. They simply disengage, and not in a passive-aggressive way, but in a way that is deeply calm, resolved, and absolute. That silence becomes louder than any outburst. It tells the narcissist that the game is over and no audience remains. This shift doesn't happen overnight. Often the super empath has been conditioned to feel responsible for other people's emotions. They've been taught to believe that love means tolerance, that loyalty means self-sacrifice. So detaching feels like betrayal at first, but over time, they begin to see the truth, that enabling dysfunction is not love, and staying emotionally entangled with someone who repeatedly wounds them is not loyalty, it's bondage. Radical detachment is the process of unhooking every emotional anchor the narcissist once used to drag the empath back into chaos, and that unhooking is liberating. The narcissist, of course, senses this detachment instantly. They might not understand it intellectually, but they feel the shift. Suddenly, their words don't sting. Their silence doesn't threaten. Their games fall flat. The empath no longer leans in. They lean back or walk away entirely. And the narcissist, who's used to seeing their target panic at the thought of being abandoned, now finds themselves the one abandoned. That role reversal is more than confusing. It's humiliating. Because for the first time, the narcissist isn't in control of the emotional narrative. The power dynamic collapses. Radical detachment is not about pretending not to feel. It's about honoring what you feel without making someone else the center of your emotional world. The empath learns to validate their own experience instead of looking to the narcissist for permission to feel hurt, confused, or angry. They stop justifying their pain. They stop hoping the narcissist will change. They stop rehearsing conversations in their head. And with every layer of emotional energy they reclaim, they become stronger, clearer, and more rooted in reality. This clarity is devastating to the narcissist because it means they can no longer rewrite the story. The empath now owns the pen. Even if contact continues, whether through shared responsibilities, family ties, or professional settings, the empath's energy becomes untouchable. They no longer absorb insults or flattery. They don't explain their choices. They don't try to be understood. And because they expect nothing from the narcissist, they're immune to both punishment and reward. This neutrality is more powerful than any insult. It makes the narcissist irrelevant, not in an external way, but in the internal landscape where the real battle has always been fought. The narcissist loses not because the empath fought harder, but because the empath stopped fighting altogether. This kind of detachment also rewires the empath's nervous system. After years of emotional turbulence, the calm becomes addictive. Peace is no longer boring, it's sacred. The empath starts to see how much mental and emotional bandwidth was being consumed by the narcissist. The late-night anxiety, the second-guessing, the over-explaining, all of it dissolves, and what remains is space. Space for self-reflection, creativity, joy, and new relationships that are grounded in mutual respect. Radical detachment isn't just about surviving the narcissist, it's about reclaiming the self that was buried beneath constant emotional warfare. The narcissist, meanwhile, is left scrambling. They may try to hoover, sending messages, apologies, sudden displays of affection, or dramatic pleas for closure. But the empath, now detached, sees through it all. They recognize the patterns. They feel no urge to respond. There is no longer a hook to hang the manipulation on. The narcissist may then escalate, turning to rage, smear campaigns, or pity tactics, but each attempt only reinforces the empath's choice to detach. The more the narcissist tries to provoke a response, the more obvious their desperation becomes, and the more obvious it becomes, the less effective it is. Radical detachment is the end of emotional captivity. It's a form of inner liberation that doesn't require the narcissist's cooperation, permission, or acknowledgement. It's a solo journey, painful at first, but transformative. The empath no longer needs closure from someone who was never honest to begin with. They no longer chase peace from someone who only creates storms. They find peace by choosing themselves, by honoring their own truth without needing it to be understood or accepted by someone incapable of empathy. Truth exposure is like turning on the lights in a room that someone has kept dark for years. It doesn't require shouting, blaming, or dramatic confrontation. It requires precision, courage, and unshakable clarity. When a super empath exposes the truth to a narcissist, it's not just about calling out lies. It's about dismantling an entire illusion that the narcissist has spent a lifetime building. The empath doesn't do it to destroy the narcissist. They do it to free themselves. And in doing so, they force the narcissist to come face to face with something they've spent their life avoiding: reality. Narcissists operate within a carefully crafted narrative. They construct a version of themselves that is superior, untouchable, admired, or victimized, depending on what will gain the most control in the moment. They rewrite stories, deny facts, and twist logic to stay in power. But the empath sees through it, not because they're looking to win, but because they feel deeply. Their intuition picks up on the inconsistencies, the gaslighting, the fake apologies, the emotional manipulation that others often miss. And when the time is right, when the empath has reclaimed enough strength, they begin to speak, not with rage, but with quiet, measured truth. That's what makes it so powerful, because when truth is delivered without the need to convince, it pierces deeper than any accusation. To the narcissist, truth feels like exposure. Their identity is fragile. It's built on external validation and internal denial. The moment someone calmly says, "That's not what happened," or "I see what you're doing," it sends a shockwave through their false sense of self. Because the narcissist survives through secrecy, misdirection, and the silencing of others. They expect fear. They expect compliance. They don't expect someone to calmly name the game out loud. And when the empath does, the narcissist scrambles. They may laugh, mock, deflect, or explode in rage. But none of it changes the fact that the truth has been spoken. And once truth is seen, it can't be unseen. The power in truth exposure lies in its simplicity. It doesn't over-explain. It doesn't seek approval. It doesn't need the narcissist to admit anything. It simply stands on its own. The empath might say, "You're trying to make me doubt myself, and I won't allow that anymore." Or, "You're rewriting what happened to avoid responsibility." That's all. Short, direct, undeniable. And while the narcissist may try to dodge or distort, the fact that the truth has been named puts them on unstable ground. Their tactics become transparent. Their control starts to fade. What's terrifying to the narcissist is that this exposure doesn't just affect them, it shifts the entire dynamic. Others begin to see. Patterns emerge. The mask starts to crack publicly. The people who used to believe the narcissist's charming facade or pitiful sob stories start to notice the manipulation, the contradictions, the emotional wreckage left behind. That social exposure is often more devastating to the narcissist than anything else, because their identity depends on how they are seen. And once someone holds up a mirror that reflects who they really are, without exaggeration, without drama, there's no going back. For the empath, truth exposure is a reclaiming of voice. It's saying, I know what happened, even if you never admit it. It's stepping out of the fog and into the light, regardless of who follows. And in that act of courage, the empath doesn't just protect themselves, they often awaken others. Because when one person stands in truth, it gives silent permission for others to do the same. The narcissist's reign thrives in isolation, secrecy, and shame. But truth breaks that isolation. It connects people, it builds strength, it dismantles the web of lies, thread by thread. This process isn't always clean. The narcissist may retaliate. They may try to smear the empath, play the victim, or rally others against them. But even these tactics begin to look desperate in the light of truth. People start to ask questions. Doubts grow. The story unravels. And the narcissist, who once controlled the narrative so easily, finds themselves surrounded by cracks they can't patch up. Meanwhile, the empath remains steady, not perfect, not emotionless, but grounded in their knowing. That grounded truth becomes a kind of quiet revolution. Truth exposure isn't about revenge, it's about reality. It's about ending the cycle of confusion, denial, and emotional entanglement. It's about choosing clarity over comfort, growth over approval, peace over pretending. The empath doesn't need to win the argument or prove anything anymore. They simply state what is and walk in alignment with that knowing. And that alignment becomes a light the narcissist can't dim, no matter how much chaos they try to create. When the narcissist sees that their tricks no longer work, that their charm no longer deceives, that their rage no longer intimidates, something inside them begins to collapse. Because the truth, once exposed, doesn't just liberate the empath, it exposes the narcissist's greatest fear, that they are not who they pretend to be and never were.